My goal is to share some of the new labeling requirements. Teresa asked me if I could come and help with this, and I said, of course, I'd be glad to. I work with the Food and Drug Administration out of the Green Bay office. I do inspections. Sorry, just a minute. I'm having trouble finding. There we go. So I want to share some of the new changes with labeling requirements and how they might affect maple producers. Most of the information I have came from the guidance documents that are available online at fda.gov. I also borrowed some slides from some of the people at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition at headquarters. And I probably should give you a disclaimer. I'm an inspector. Yes, I've been doing this for 10 years or so, but I'm not the person who decides what or how FDA enforces things. But this is what I think is the rules mean after looking at the regulations and the guidance documents. And but I don't get to decide. It's just like at home. If there's a big decision to be made, I've been married long enough to know that there is a higher power that has to go through an approval process before I can make any final decisions. And thank you, Matt, for starting off with the jokes, the maple syrup jokes. I didn't want to be the first one, so I have one. How do maple producers tell secrets? Surreptitiously. It's one advantage of this system. I can't hear the groans from people after I tell jokes, so this is good. Oh, I also have a recipe for maple margarita that I think I should share before I forget. It is, you find any good recipe for a margarita, instead of simple syrup, you use maple syrup. And instead of tequila, use a nice smoky mezcal. And I think it's a wonderful combination. It'll make you feel like you are in the sugar shack with the fire going and wishing you were on a beach. One of my favorites. So, what do I hope to share today? My goal is to give you some of the basics of what needs to be on a label, and then what are some of the new changes, what are the new requirements, and do they apply to you? That's my goal. If I don't answer your questions, go ahead and ask, and hopefully I can answer them. So what has to be on a label? Basically, it has to say what's in the container, how much is in the container, who put it there, or who's selling it, an ingredient statement, what's in it, nutrition labeling. There are some exemptions for nutrition labeling, allergen labeling if it applies, and it's very important because there are a lot of people that are allergic to things, and then anything else important with the material facts about the food. Some of the exemptions from FDA's labeling rules. The nutrition information, an exemption for that is small businesses. So if a retailer has annual gross sales under $500,000, they don't have to put a nutrition label on, provided that there aren't any nutrition claims or other information on the label. A retailer that just sells food, if it's the total food sales are under 50,000, that's another exemption. Medical foods, that's just an example of another type of exemption. Probably doesn't apply to anything here. They have completely different requirements. Same for dietary supplements. And then some foods that don't have any real nutrients, like coffee beans or tea leaves or something. So the standards of the label. The principal display panel is usually the front of the package, the portion most likely to be seen. It has to say what it is and how much is in there. It's a standardized format, basically so that it's easy to find out what you need to find and you can compare between different products. The quantity statement has to say how much in weight or volume, has to be on the principal display panel, should be in metric, and it has to have US customer measure. And how big the container is determines how big the statements have to be. The information panel has to be on the right, and if that's not available, it's the next one to the right, which for most purposes is the back. And the information panel has to contain information about the manufacturer, packer, or distributor, ingredient list, all ingredients have to be listed, the nutrition facts panel, unless exempt, and allergens, if applicable. So why was the nutrition facts label updated? A couple of things. There's updated scientific information. The serving sizes were updated to reflect changes in amounts consumed. And the new format helps draw attention to the important parts. So an example, here's the new label. The serving size is larger and in bold font. Calories are larger and in bold font. The daily values have been updated. And the important part for everybody here probably is number 4, the added sugars. Also, vitamin D and potassium are not listed, which I don't think affects anybody here, but the added sugar is the important part here. And a little more detail on that. Here's the original label and the new label. You can see the larger font in the serving size. The calorie part is larger, daily values, added sugars. There's a whole new line there. And then vitamin D, potassium. So the added sugars, this is what we care about. Sugars was changed to total sugars. Includes, to help clarify that the added sugars is a subcomponent. These are usually sugars that are added during processing or packaging or whatnot. So what does this mean for a food like maple syrup that is all sugar? Do we have to put added sugar on maple syrup? And the answer is no. The food bill, agriculture food bill, the farm bill, I mean, stated that nutrition labels can't require the gram amount of added sugars for single ingredient sugars, honey, agave, and maple syrup. So they still have the space there, but they don't have to have the statement that says added sugars. They still have to say the total amount of sugar, but they don't have to say added sugar. So this is what we end up with. This is an example of the label. And of course, you can get this from your friendly neighborhood label manufacturer. And they are probably up on this even better than I am. So I went into the frequently asked questions part of FDA.gov and pulled out a couple of things that would apply. One of them is how will single ingredient sugars like packages and containers of pure honey, maple syrup, and other sugars be labeled? And like I just said, they're not required to include the number of grams of added sugars, but still have to have the declaration for the percent daily value for added sugars. And then manufacturers are encouraged to use the cross symbol immediately followed with a daily value statement in a footnote. And if we go back, you can see the daily value amount. Another frequently asked question is if the package is a syrup and it meets the requirements for a linear display or smaller package, what should it look like? And here's what it looks like. Now, when are these new changes, new requirements supposed to take effect? For large manufacturers, and here it's defined as $10 million in sales or more a year, it was supposed to be last January. Less than 10 million supposed to be this January 1st. And for maple syrup, not until July. Those are still in force on paper, but I discovered recently that in September, they decided that because of COVID, there would be some extra flexibility. And in the middle of this, it says that the FDA will not focus on enforcement actions during 2021. So the long and the short of that is you have more time to adjust your labels. The large manufacturers got that last year, got that same flexibility last year, and now small manufacturers get it this year. And I would imagine we haven't passed the July 7th requirement date for maple producers, but I'm sure there will be lots of flexibility for that this year too. So, in summary, I guess all these label changes, what you need to take home is that there are some label changes. Maple syrup is exempt from the added sugar statement. There are exemptions to nutrition labeling for depending on how big you are. And probably also how you sell it. If it's all retail from your location, you can probably sell it without it, no matter how big you are. And you have some extra time to comply with these changes. So some resources, and I'll make sure these get to you. There are a couple very helpful compliance guides, and we'll get these to you. One is for the revision of the labels, and the other one is for declaration of added sugars. A lot of this second one is for cranberry products, but a lot of it applies to you guys too. And then the food labeling guide is always very useful. Good place to go if you're ever wondering about things. And with that, I guess I am tapped out, you might say. Any questions? Oh, let me see if I can see your questions. I saw it popping up a couple times.
Yeah, if you can't see the
I think
questions there, I'd be happy to read them to you.
Sure, go ahead and do that.
Okay. First question. If it is an exact weight, i.e. 8 ounces or 16 ounces, must you include the net weight and serving declarations, or can you just use a serving as varied? I think they want to know if we can put the word varied on the nutritional panel if it's
I don't
not an exact
think
weight. Maybe
so.
that's what they're getting at.
I think the serving size is standardized. And so I think you have to stick with that. But Matt might be able to answer that too.
I'm just kind of taking some liberties with the question here, but I'm thinking like if it's a, oh, you're right, the serving size would be the, no, I think it's with the input where you put the servings per container on the nutritional label. So like if it's not an 8 ounce bottle, which would have 8 servings, it might be a 250 ml bottle, which would have 8.45 servings.
I guess try to get as close as you can. I'm not sure anybody's going to raise a stink about a small change like that.
Is that usually, I guess my question to follow up on that, is it usually better to, you prefer us to round up or round down on those situations? So like if it's 8.5, we call it 9, and if it's 8.4, we call it 8. Is there a rule about that?
Not that I know of. Most of my time is spent looking at facilities and processes and not evaluating labels. But I would think the closer you get it to actual, the better. And whether it's 8.5 ounces that are, or 8.5 servings that actually fit into a bottle, I don't think in my opinion, I don't think it's a big deal.
On 3 different containers.
Okay, so here's another question. If we have a generic nutritional panel and we want to use it on an 8 ounce and a 16 ounce and a 32 ounce bottle, do we have to write in the serving size manually? I think that's where the word varied, that's what they want to get at.
I see.
We just write in 8,
well,
or can we put the word varied on there and use that same
standard
nutritional panel on several different volumes of bottles?
I think you could get away with changing the number of servings per container to as close as you can get it.
So better to manually write it in than you can't use the word varied.
I don't think I would use varied.
Okay, the next question. Your samples of the PDP show metric followed by US customary. Is it okay if they're listed in the opposite order?
Yes.
And so do customary first.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, that's one of the slides I borrowed from somebody else and I left it the way it was, and I wondered that too.
Somebody pointed out that we do have a checklist on our WMSPA members only section of our website, which kind of helps people work through some of the things you went over today. So it's just a reminder to people that are listening in. There is a checklist there under the labeling guidelines, and any new information we get from you today, or we'll also put some stuff there as well. There's another question here. Is an email address sufficient for address requirements?
I don't think so, but I would have to read through the labeling guide just to make sure. I think there has to be a phone number at least and name of company, but I would read through the guide and make sure.
Okay, I see Stefan is typing in an answer. I've always understood it as if you can't find the business name in the phone book, a full address is required. If you can find them in the phone book, then you can just put a city and state, but I don't think emails function, but looks like Stefan's typing something. We'll read that when it comes up.
Yeah, Stefan knows his
He
stuff.
just come back to you, so you can respond to it when you see it, if we don't see it. We do have one other question we'll move on to here. Food labeling guide was last updated in January of 2013. Do you know if there are plans to update this soon?
I don't know specifically, but I would certainly hope so. Yes. They should be updated very soon. Like I said, that is part of the bureaucracy I don't get to work with very much.
There's another couple of questions here. This is from Stefan. It says, to clarify, flavored maple syrup, which has multiple ingredients to be declared within the ingredient statement, requires added sugars in the wording. I guess that's the question to you. Does it require added sugars if it's a multi-ingredient, not just pure maple syrup?
Oh, yeah, I think so, because a lot of the exemptions for the added sugar statement is single ingredient sugars. So if it's just pure maple syrup, you don't have to put added sugars. If it is something else, the identity is no longer maple syrup, then yeah, it probably does have to put in added sugars.
Okay, we've got one more. Did I understand you to say that if the producer sells retail direct to consumer, then labels are not required?
Yes, if they sell directly themselves, if they're wholesaling it to a grocery store or somebody else, then it'll have to be labeled. But if they sell it themselves, direct to consumer, I think there's an exemption for the nutrition label then, yeah.
Okay, so the exemption is only for the nutrition. It's still required to have some sort of a label on it, even if you just hand it to the person face-to-face sales.
Well, even for that, like you stop at a roadside stand and order a hamburger, there's no label on that, is there? If it's so I think if you're selling direct to consumers, all labeling requirements are exempt.
Okay, thank you.
But again,
Patrick,
I'm not the decider. Oh, if I'm still on the phone, I wanted to thank Christine for her description on the FDA website from yesterday and earlier today. That was good. I would like to borrow that for our use in my office.
do you see one there to read? We're reading Stefan's answer to the email sufficient question. An email may not be substituted per 21 CFR 101, but may be added somewhere, not as an intervening material. That is not between required information. I usually see email addresses, websites, etc. after the zip code. So he's saying city, state, zip code is always required, street address required unless provided in local directory. So I think that kind of answers. The emails are great to add as extra information, but they can't be the primary source.
Thank you for looking that up, Stefan.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Stefan, for doing that. And Patrick, do you have anything else to add before we move on?
I do not. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it and appreciate the efforts you put into this. Thank you.